Hi everyone, it's Michelle Silverman Bedell from Silversons Realty. I'm going to add Maria Esposito from Citizens Bank to the call, and we are going to speak about due diligence from a financial perspective. If you take, so let's just see where Maria is. Maria, great.
Hi.
You look rested from your vacation. I
Thank you. Yes, I'm very tan.
very sunburned. I'm not allowed to be in the sun, but you look great. So
Thank you.
today we are going to speak about doing due diligence for our clients, and I'll have you start, Marie, and speak about from a financial when you're taking out a mortgage, what a
Yeah.
buyer expect.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, first things first, with when you know that you're, going to be getting financing for the mortgage,
Right,
um, first thing that you want to do is get pre-approved, with a accredited lender or, a mortgage lender or a bank.
right,
Part of my due diligence when I'm pre-approving, because I do think that like there are different, like not all pre-approvals have or are created equal, right? I mean, I've even seen, like, unfortunately, people that I work with, say, oh, here's a pre-approval letter when, they didn't actually look at their pay stubs or tax returns if necessary. So for me, I'm doing basically three sets of due diligence: a credit due diligence, meaning I'm reviewing the credit report, not just for late payments, but also like, do they have student loans? Are they in deferment, and how do we handle that? Or, mainly, do they have credit, right? Or, do they
right,
have the kind of trade lines? And then on the income side, depending on if you work for someone or if you're self-employed, the due diligence on the lender side will vary. And then the third thing that I'm looking at are, assets. Like, where's the money coming from for the down payment, for the closing costs? How much money are you going to have left after you buy this new property?
correct.
Um, so that's all part of my initial due diligence when pre-approving.
Right. I think, and you probably continue this process throughout until you close, right?
We
Until
do. Yes.
loan. And even
Yes.
just before the loan, do you check any paperwork to make sure they're still employed at the same time?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, like, that's the due diligence to do pre-approval. And then once somebody's in contract, we, go through that file with more of a fine tooth comb, if you will. And then we're looking, like, were there any large deposits or large transfers in and out of your bank accounts? And we're going to ask about those. But like you said, yes, you need to maintain your credit. There's with technology these days, Michelle, there's all sorts of things now that lenders have access to. We get notified when you open up a new account for credit, right? So we'll get a ding and it's like, oh, undisclosed debt monitoring alert. So beware of those things. I always tell my clients, please don't open up any new credit without speaking to me first. Don't go. I had a client once go and buy literally a Ferrari 2 days before we were supposed to close on his home in Connecticut.
Right,
Yeah. And then, yeah, right before the closing, the last thing that a lender does is what's called a verbal verification of employment, where we're calling up to make sure that they are still employed, at said company.
right. So it's a whole process, and you have
It
to
is.
be careful. People don't realize that, and they'll take out a loan. They'll buy furniture in anticipation of moving, or if they're relocating, they'll buy a new car, or they'll lease a new car, or finance it. So everything
Right.
interferes with your credit or affects your credit, and you really don't want to do anything when you're making a purchase such as a home. I can tell you from a real estate perspective, people ask me, what do you mean by due diligence? Somebody who works for me even asked that. What do you do in terms of due diligence? And
Right.
I mean, to explain it, what I do is really whether I work for the buyer or the seller, I investigate everything about that property I can find out about, right? From if it's short of a title search, and if I have a question about title or survey, I will contact a title company, somebody I know of one, and I know of many. So
Yeah.
I'll check, the building department. I check to make sure that there are no open permits or anything, any violations
Nations. Yeah.
property, right? And that's very important. I'll make sure that there are no variances or illegal decks or underground oil tanks. So I check even environmental issues. I'll check with the fire department in certain communities, depending upon who is in control of any information regarding any underground oil tanks. I'll also look at for a property in terms of when I walk around a property, I'll wonder, is that deck legal? Is that shed legal? Is that patio legal? Is it within the setbacks? Or does it extend beyond the limits and into the setbacks? That would
Yeah.
think that, maybe they never took out a permit for the deck or even a patio. People forget about patios. If it's above a certain amount of inches from the ground, one has to be concerned. And
Yeah.
also, I think depends on which community you're living. I also check with the assessor, right? So I'm very concerned about taxes. I'm very concerned. Often the taxes on the listing are off. I've seen taxes off by as much as $5,000. People forget to update their listings, so the taxes can be I saw a listing today. They were from 2024. We're almost at the end of 2025.
Right.
Really have to pay attention to it. It's all part of you doing your due diligence. I check square footage. I check how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms are in a house. Often that powder room or that
Do
bathroom
you,
in the basement.
I have a question for you.
Yeah,
Do you ask the seller or do you check things like how old is the roof? How old is your HVAC system? Like if you're concerned that that might be, like that might come up with issues with potential buyers?
right. Like not only will I check with the municipality, right?
Hmm.
Often ask the owner, when did you update your roof? When did you update your heating unit, your AC, your compressors, your hot water tank? When did you, regarding any of the systems, the major systems in the house? Do they have a generator, for instance?
Right.
How old is the generator? Often people have solar panels now on the house. One has to ask, were those leased or do you own them? Do,
Right.
can you sell them? So all of these things factor into the home. And although I do ask the owner, and specifically with a co-op or a condo, I'll ask them their maintenance and their common charges.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't trust their information. I do all my own due diligence. I
Right.
contact the management company. It's very important to get as much information regarding that property as possible.
Right.
Although I believe the owner, it's my responsibility to
Right.
further and to check with the management company. Also, I'm
Right.
checking assessment. Are there assessments on this co-op or condominium? It's very important to know, especially when it's co-ops or condos. You want to make sure you would lend in that building,
Oh
right?
yeah, I mean that's part of our due diligence, right? I mean, I try to do as much of that up front when somebody tells me if somebody shares with me like a particular project that they're looking at.
Right,
Listen, lots of times I they might not tell me the building until I might not be introduced to somebody until they're actually in contract, and so
right,
then we'll do the due diligence then. But anybody that I've pre-approved, I'm always like, hey, before you make an offer on something, send me the address of the co-op or the condo, and let me check it out and
right.
see, what due diligence we've already done.
Right. So it's like an amazing amount of work that we do even before a person gets into contract. I think also, I want to say one other thing that I think is very important. And in many cases, this can involve any easements that run with the property, private
Mm,
or public easements, or agreements amongst neighbors. It happened to me many years ago where a client of mine wanted to buy a property. They were three contiguous properties in White Plains. And he was an investor and he was going to build on this property, renovate it, and then flip it and then sell the property after he did his renovation. It turned out that although we had a survey and although we checked the survey, there were no easements. Apparently, there were private easements that his attorney, knowing that he wanted to do certain things with the property, checked out before. They did kind of like an abbreviated title search, and
Yeah.
it was an easement, a private easement amongst the three owners. They were contiguous properties that would have prevented him from doing what he wanted to do.
What he wanted to do. Yeah.
Very important that you really do as much investigation and
Yes.
about a specific property, and you really have to understand what your client's needs are.
Yeah.
So, having said that, anything else you want to
I
jump?
know. I mean, I think that the point we want to get across is that there's a lot of due diligence that needs to be done on all of these things, right? The collateral, the homes themselves, and then the buyers themselves too. And I would just stress that, like, you want to make sure that you're working with people like yourself and me
Right,
who are, versed in doing that, and, not taking the shortcuts. And how much better it is to do that, like, sooner versus later, right?
right.
Before you,
You don't want to go down the road and know you can't sell a property because it has a lien on it, or you can't sell it because, the buyer can't buy it because they can't do what they want with it, right? They can't put a pool in, for instance.
yeah,
So
yep,
these are things that are very important. I mean, you represent somebody and you want to represent them accurately and efficiently and really honestly. You really have to do as much legwork up front as possible.
yeah, 100%. All right. Well, thank you, Michelle. Have a great evening and a great weekend. And it's nice that the heat wave broke a little bit. So, hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. And yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll have to figure out when we're going to chat next week as we approach the July 4th holiday.
Right.
So we'll
Well,
let everyone know.
have a great week. A
You
great
too. Bye bye.
well. Bye bye now.